Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She sat 2 seats from the end, her shoulders straight, her eyes locked on the flickering map projected on the far wall. The others leaned forward, exchanging glances, trading murmured notes, already forming their little circles of trust. But not with her. Not tonight. The colonel's voice droned, steady as a metronome. Target is here, enemy movement expected here, approach vector through the ravine. The words carried weight, but they washed over her like rain against glass. She absorbed them, every detail, every pause, yet she felt the subtle edge of being sidelined, as if her presence was tolerated, not invited. Her hand stayed still on the table. She didn't fidget. She didn't clear her throat. She let the silence around her grow because that silence was something she had learned to live in. It wasn't new. It wasn't strange. It was her shadow. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. When the briefing ended, chairs scraped, boots scuffed, men and women in uniform clustered, already dissecting plans. She rose slowly, methodical, her eyes never leaving the map until it blinked off into darkness. No one asked her opinion. No one looked her way. And still, she walked out of the tent as if she carried something heavier than all of them combined. The night air was sharp, cold, the kind that cuts the lungs and makes each breath feel earned. She pulled her jacket tighter, gazing at the horizon where mountains cut black silhouettes against a navy sky. Somewhere out there, tomorrow's mission waited. Somewhere out there, men would die, women too. And she knew, without needing to be told, that she might be one of them. She lit a cigarette, though she hated the taste. It wasn't about the nicotine. It was about the ritual, the flare of flame, the faint orange glow in the dark, proof she existed, proof she hadn't vanished into the quiet they seemed so intent on placing her in. She thought of home, a porch light left on in a small town she hadn't seen in years. Her father, hands cracked from work, never once saying the word proud but carrying it in his silence. Her younger brother, gone now, buried under a folded flag. That was why she was here, why she kept standing when others looked away. She wasn't chasing medals. She wasn't chasing glory. She was chasing the empty space he had left behind. The next morning came gray, heavy with mist. The convoy lined up along the dirt track, engines rumbling low. She moved toward her vehicle, checking her rifle with a precision born not of habit but of necessity. Every part, every chamber, every click was a small prayer, a whispered promise that when the moment came, she would not fail. A sergeant brushed past her, muttering something under his breath. She caught the word liability. She didn't flinch, didn't answer, just closed the chamber with a soft metallic snap. She had heard worse before. They rolled out, dust plumed, tires groaned. The rhythm of the road pressed into her bones as the mountains swallowed them whole. She sat near the back, helmet shadowing her eyes, weapon across her lap. Around her, chatter rose and fell, men joking too loudly, masking nerves with laughter, one humming a tune under his breath. She didn't join them. She stared at the window, watching the fog curl like smoke between the peaks. Halfway through the ravine, the world shifted. A sharp crack, the unmistakable sting of incoming fire. "Contact left," someone shouted. The convoy lurched, brakes screamed, dust blinded the air. She felt the jolt in her spine as the vehicle skidded to a halt. Shouts, orders, chaos bleeding into every direction. She didn't freeze, she didn't shout. She moved, rifle up, eyes narrowing, heart slowing. The world narrowed to sound, the rattle of machine guns, the ping of rounds against armor, the desperate calls for cover. Through the haze she spotted it, a glint on the ridge, barely visible. A sniper, well-positioned, watching the kill zone like a hunter waiting for prey. No one else saw it. She slid out of the vehicle, belly hitting the dirt. Rocks dug into her ribs, dust filled her mouth. She ignored it, scope pressed to her eye, breath measured. 1, 2. The shot cracked. The glint vanished. Silence followed, not across the battlefield, but in the narrow thread of space where her bullet had found its mark. She exhaled, slow, controlled. Someone yelled, "Sniper down!" but they didn't say her name, didn't look her way. She didn't need them to. Minutes blurred into hours. The firefight dragged, then faltered, then died. Smoke hung heavy in the ravine, mixed with the iron tang of blood. Medics scrambled. Bodies were lifted. The living staggered back toward the convoy, carrying silence where laughter had once been. She sat apart, rifle balanced across her knees, eyes fixed on nothing. She could still hear the echo of the shot in her head. Not triumph, not victory, just necessity. Just another weight added to the ones already pressing down on her shoulders. A corporal limped past, clutching his arm, his face pale. He looked at her just for a second as if trying to place what he had seen. Then he nodded, barely, almost reluctant, but it was something. That night the camp was quiet. Fires burned low. No songs, no banter, just the rustle of bandages, the whispers of names that wouldn't be called again. She sat on a crate, staring at the ground, fingers tracing the scar along her wrist, a reminder of a time she almost gave up. But didn't. A lieutenant approached, hesitating, then sitting beside her. He didn't speak for a long time, just stared at the dirt, jaw working. Finally, he whispered, "My kid's 3. If I don't make it back, he won't even remember my face." She didn't turn, didn't answer right away. Then softly, "That's why you stand where you stand, so someone else's kid doesn't grow up without a father." He looked at her, startled by the simplicity. She didn't look back. She just exhaled smoke into the night and let the silence settle between them. The truth was, she wasn't sure anyone's sacrifice ever made sense. But she knew one thing, it had to mean something. It had to. Because if it didn't, then her brother's name on that folded flag was just ink. And she couldn't let that be true. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. The sounds of camp blurred, footsteps, distant engines, a cough in the dark, all layered into the strange lullaby of soldiers between battles. Tomorrow another mission, another ravine, another silence waiting to be filled. And when it came, when everyone else hesitated, doubted, or turned away, she knew she would step forward. Because her duty wasn't about victory. It was about standing where no one else would stand. Why did her hands still tremble when the shooting stopped? The night was calm, the kind of silence that pressed against the ears, but her fingers wouldn't stay still. She held them under the table in the dim light of the mess tent, hidden from the others, flexing, clenching, as if trying to convince herself they still belonged to her. Around her, soldiers scraped trays, spoke in low tones, avoided eye contact. They moved like ghosts, shadows drifting in and out of the tent. No one mentioned her name. No one said, "She saved us today." But she had seen it in their eyes when the convoy rolled back into camp. A hesitation, a flicker, a silent acknowledgement they weren't ready to put into words. Not yet. She forced her hand flat on the table, willed the tremor to stop. Across the tent, the lieutenant who had spoken to her the night before sat with 3 others, his bandaged arm stiff at his side. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't telling stories. He stared into his cup like it carried answers no one else could see. The memory of his words clung to her. "My kid's 3. She had wanted to ask his name, wanted to know if the boy liked toy trucks or baseball or if he ran through the grass barefoot. But she hadn't, because asking meant caring, and caring meant adding another weight to her already breaking back. Still she cared. She always cared. A voice called from the entrance, "Briefing in 5. Chairs scraped again. Soldiers filed out, some leaving meals untouched. She rose slowly, sliding her tray aside, and followed the flow into the briefing tent. The map glowed again, green lines crisscrossing rugged terrain. Another mission. Another march into the teeth of an enemy who seemed to melt into the rocks, who struck and vanished like smoke. The colonel's voice was firm. "We've confirmed a supply route, small but critical. We disrupt it, we cut them off. Less resistance for the forward unit next week." His hand traced the valley on the map. "We insert here, hold until extraction. It's not about killing them all, it's about choking them." Murmurs rose, questions, objection. too exposed, not enough cover, risk of ambush. She listened. She always listened. And then, when the colonel asked for volunteers, she stepped forward before the silence grew too heavy. The room shifted. Not admiration, not respect, just surprise. Her voice was steady. "I'll go." No hesitation, no falter. The colonel nodded once, noted. By dawn, they were moving again. This time smaller, lighter. A team meant to slip in and hold, not storm and dominate. She carried only what mattered: rifle, ammunition, water, fragments of strength pieced together from years of learning how not to break. The valley was narrower than she imagined. The rocks pressed close, rising like jagged teeth. The sun burned hot overhead, bleaching color from the world until everything looked like bone. They moved in silence, boots crunching against gravel, radios hissing occasionally with static. She walked near the rear, eyes scanning ridges, ears tuned to every echo. The others kept glancing upward, nerves straining at invisible strings. Halfway in, the lieutenant slowed, his voice low. "Feels wrong." She agreed. She could taste it too, that metallic edge in the air, that pressure in her gut that told her danger wasn't far. But she didn't speak. She simply adjusted her rifle strap and kept walking. Hours passed. The heat grew unbearable. Sweat traced down her back, stinging her eyes. By the time they reached the choke point marked on the map, the sun had started to dip, casting the rocks in long, jagged shadows. They set up positions: sandbags, tripods, a radio relay. The lieutenant organized his men with precision, his jaw tight, his voice calm. She took her spot on the ridge, belly against the stone, scope sweeping the horizon. And then nothing. No gunfire, no movement, no sound but the hiss of wind through the rocks. It stretched on, hour after hour. Soldiers fidgeted, whispered, some slept. She stayed still, motionless, her eyes locked through glass, searching, waiting. Because she knew they were out there, watching, deciding. It was long after midnight when the first sound came, faint, distant, like gravel shifting under weight. She froze, breath caught. And then she saw them, shapes, dozens, moving slow through the dark, too quiet, too precise. An ambush. She whispered into the radio, "They're here." The camp jolted awake. Men grabbed rifles, scrambled to cover. The lieutenant's voice snapped like a whip. "Hold fire, wait." The shapes closed in. 50 meters, 40, 30. The air thickened with dread. Hearts hammered, fingers twitched near triggers. She aimed, locked her sight on the lead figure, breath steady. "Now," the lieutenant ordered. The night erupted. Muzzle flashes tore through the dark. Thunder rolled between the rocks. Shouts, screams. The valley lit in bursts of orange and white. She fired once, twice, 3 times, each shot deliberate, each shot carving space where none existed. But they kept coming. From the ridges, from the shadows, pouring like water into every gap. Bullets sliced overhead. Dust sprayed into her mouth. She rolled, shifted, kept firing. And then she saw it, the radio operator falling. The comms line severed, their lifeline cut. Without it, no extraction. Without it, no one left alive by morning. She moved before she thought, sprinting through fire, diving across open ground, sliding into the wreck of the relay. Wires tangled, sparks hissed. She yanked tools from her pack, hands moving blind, frantic. Bullets cracked around her. Rock chips stung her cheek. Someone shouted her name, or maybe they didn't. Maybe she only imagined it. Her fingers worked, trembling but precise. Strip, twist, connect. The radio sputtered, came alive. "Relay restored," she rasped. A breathless pause. Then the lieutenant's voice: "Copy, hold them off, extraction inbound." But extraction was 20 minutes away. 20 minutes of holding ground, already slipping away. She pressed her back to the shattered equipment, chest heaving, rifle slick with sweat. Across the valley, she could see them still coming, shadows endless against the rock. Her throat burned, her hands ached, Her body screamed for rest. But she didn't move, didn't yield, because this was the moment, the place where no one else would stand. And if she fell, if she broke, the others would too. She lifted her rifle again and whispered almost to herself, "Not tonight." The firefight stretched into eternity. Time broke apart into fragments of sound and silence, light and shadow. She didn't count her shots. She didn't measure her pain. She simply existed in the space between breaths, between lives. When the sound of rotors finally split the night, it felt unreal, like a dream clawing its way into the dark. Helicopters swept low, searchlights cutting through smoke. The enemy scattered, vanishing into the rocks like they had come. Soldiers stumbled toward extraction, some limping, some carried. She was the last to move. She stayed at the ridge until the final light swept across empty ground, until there was no one left to shoot at, until her chest hurt from holding still. Then slowly she rose, rifle heavy in her arms, and walked toward the waiting bird. She didn't look back, but she knew, in the silence left behind, that the ground remembered. And so did she. Why did the extraction feel heavier than the fight itself? The helicopter thumped against the air, blades chopping the night into fragments of noise and vibration. Inside, soldiers sat slumped, helmets tilted, eyes closed. Bandages stained dark, faces hollow. The smell of cordite and sweat clung to everything. She sat against the wall, rifle across her knees, head bowed. Her body hummed with exhaustion, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying the valley, the sparks from the radio, the bullets chewing rock inches from her face, the moment she thought she wouldn't make it. And then her brother's voice, the one she hadn't heard in years, whispering in the back of her mind, "Don't you dare stop." She closed her eyes tighter as if she could push it away, but the memory clung, his laugh, his stubbornness. The way he used to tell her she was stronger than she believed. He was wrong about many things, but not that. The lieutenant across from her caught her glance. His lips parted as if to say something, but then he looked away. His bandage bled through again. He pressed his hand against it, jaw tightening. The flight was short, too short. By the time the bird touched down, dawn was already clawing at the horizon, painting the sky with pale streaks of orange. They disembarked in silence. No cheers, no slaps on the back, just the quiet shuffle of boots against dirt. The medics moved in first. The wounded were guided away. The rest dispersed, some heading to the tents, some to the mess, some nowhere at all. She walked alone toward her bunk, but she didn't make it. The colonel stood waiting, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You kept the line open," he said. "Not praise, not warmth, just a fact." "Yes, sir." "You'll file a report." "Yes, sir." He hesitated, studying her. "You held longer than most would have." She didn't answer. He didn't press, just nodded once curt and walked away. She stood in the dust for a long time, watching his back until it disappeared. Then she went inside, dropped her rifle on the rack, and sat on her bunk. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking again. She pressed them flat against her knees, tried to slow her breath, tried to remember what still tethered her to this place. It wasn't medals, wasn't orders, wasn't the faint scraps of recognition that never quite turned into acceptance. It was her brother, and the promise she made when she saw the flag folded on her father's lap. "I'll carry it, even if it breaks me." The days blurred. Missions came, missions went. Each one carried new losses, new silences filling the camp at night. She became a fixture, present, steady, but never central. They noticed her only when they needed precision or silence or someone to do the thing no one else wanted. And she did it, every time, without question. Until the night the lieutenant sought her out. He found her by the edge of camp, sitting with her back against a tire, cigarette ember glowing faint in the dark. "You don't sleep much," he said. She exhaled smoke. "Neither do you." He chuckled once, bit her. "No, I hear their voices every time I close my eyes." She didn't ask whose, she didn't need to. He shifted, leaning against the tire beside her. They don't see it, you know, what you do. Her jaw clenched. Doesn't matter. It does, his voice dropped. It kept me alive, kept us alive. She let the silence stretch. The night hummed with insects, distant generators, the restless shuffle of boots. Finally, she said, I'm not here to be seen, I'm here to stand. He looked at her, searching her face, but she kept her gaze fixed on the ground. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. My kid's name is Noah. The words hit harder than gunfire. She swallowed, smoke catching in her throat. Noah. Yeah, he likes dinosaurs, carries a green one everywhere. My wife keeps telling me he's too old for it, but I hope he never lets it go. His voice cracked on the last word. She wanted to reach out, to say something, but all she managed was a nod, slow, almost invisible. The moment passed. He stood, adjusted his rifle, and walked back into the camp. She stayed alone again. But this time something different burned in her chest. Not just duty, not just memory, something warmer, sharper. A reminder that even in this place, surrounded by dust and death, the things they carried mattered. Noah mattered. And maybe she did too. The next mission was different, not an ambush, not a hold, a rescue. Intel said a local family had been taken, hostages for leverage, bargaining chips in a war that never seemed to end. The orders were simple: retrieve them if possible, leave no trace if not. The team moved out at night, shadows slipping across barren ground. She stayed at point, eyes locked on the horizon, rifle tight against her shoulder. The compound was smaller than expected, crude walls, a single tower, a gate hanging loose on broken hinges. Too quiet. They breached, flashlights cut through dust, voices barked in the dark. And then the sound she never forgot, a child crying. Her chest tightened. The others swept the rooms, weapons up. She moved toward the sound, heartbeat thundering in her ears. She found them in the back. A woman, two children, terrified, thin, huddled against the wall. The boy couldn't have been older than 5, and in his hands a small plastic dinosaur, green. Her breath caught. For a moment the walls dissolved. The dust, the guns, the war gone. All she saw was Noah, the boy she hadn't met but already carried in her chest. She lowered her rifle, kneeling slowly. The boy's eyes widened, tears streaking down his cheeks. It's okay, she whispered, her voice cracked. She swallowed and tried again. It's okay, you're safe now. The woman pulled the children close, whispering thanks in a language she barely understood. But she didn't need the words. The mission blurred after that. Exfiltration, gunfire at their backs, the rush of adrenaline, the pounding of boots, the roar of engines. She remembered little of it. Only the boy's hand clutching that dinosaur, the way he refused to let go, even as soldiers lifted him into the vehicle. Back at camp, the family was handed to medics, their fate beyond her reach. But that night, lying awake on her bunk, she felt something shift. For the first time in years, she let herself imagine what it might mean to survive this, to walk away, to see her father again, to maybe someday tell Noah that his father had someone out there who stood not for victory but for him. She didn't cry, she couldn't. But she let the thought stay. And for a soldier who lived in silence, that was enough. Why did the camp feel quieter after the rescue, even though no one spoke of it? Days passed, but the air carried something unspoken. A shift. Soldiers still moved, still cleaned their rifles, still barked at one another in clipped voices. But beneath it all was a thread of silence that wrapped around everything, like a blanket no one admitted was there. She felt it most in the mornings. The mess tent was no louder than usual, trays clattering, boots scuffing, spoons scraping against metal. But in the spaces between sounds she could hear it. The memory of a child crying, the sound of fragile hands clutching plastic. The boy with the green dinosaur haunted her, not as a ghost but as a reminder. A reminder of Noah. A reminder that even in war, innocence wasn't fully dead. She smoked less after that mission, not out of choice. She'd light one, watch the smoke rise, then stub it out halfway. It didn't fill her the way it once had, didn't ease the weight. It only reminded her of the silence she couldn't quite name. The lieutenant noticed. Of course he did. He seemed to notice more than the others, the way she sat alone, the way her hands lingered on her rifle longer than necessary, the way she never flinched in firefights but sometimes did in silence. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, he approached. No hesitation this time. He sat beside her, back against the same rusted tire, rifle resting across his lap. "You were different on that mission," he said. Her jaw tightened. "We all were." "Not like that." He studied her, his voice low. "When you found the kids, I saw your face." She looked away. "Doesn't matter." "It matters," he pressed. "It's the first time I've seen you look human." The words cut, not cruelly, not with malice, but deep all the same. She stood abruptly, brushing dirt from her uniform. "I am human." He didn't stop her as she walked away. But his words clung to her, long after the sun was gone. That night sleep refused her. She lay on her bunk, staring at the canvas above, the hum of generators outside filling the silence. She thought of her brother again, the way he used to tease her for being too serious, too quiet. "You're not made of stone, you know," he'd say. She used to laugh, used to shove his shoulder and roll her eyes. Now in the darkness, she wondered if maybe he was right. The next mission came fast, too fast. No time to think, no time to breathe. The colonel's voice was brisk, clipped. "Intel confirms high-value target moving through the region. Likely with escort, small window. We hit fast, we hit clean." The team geared up, exhaustion weighing heavy. She felt it in her bones, the way her body resisted the armor, the way her breath came ragged even before the march began. But she moved anyway, because that's what she did. The night was moonless, perfect for shadows. They crept along dry riverbeds across jagged ridges until the target convoy came into view, headlights dim, engines purring low. The lieutenant's voice crackled in her ear. "Positions, wait for my mark." She crawled into place, rifle braced, scope reflecting faint light. Through the glass she saw them, armed guards, scanning the dark, hands steady on triggers. But then she saw something else. The passenger in the second vehicle, a woman, head covered, hands bound, face bruised. A prisoner. Her throat tightened. "Mark in 10, the lieutenant whispered. Her finger hovered near the trigger. 9-8. She thought of the boy, the dinosaur, the green plastic clutched tight in tiny hands. 7-6. She thought of Noah, who didn't even know his father's face yet. 5. Her chest ached. 4. Her breath came uneven. 3. If they fired now, the prisoner would be caught in the storm. 2. She made her choice. 1. Abort, she cut in, voice sharp. Prisoner in the convoy. The channel hissed with static, confusion. The lieutenant's voice came back, tight with disbelief. "Say again." "Passenger bound, not enemy. We fire now, she dies." Silence, the kind that lasts forever. Finally his voice, "Hold, repeat, hold." The mission shifted in an instant. Plans abandoned, improvisation forced. They tracked instead, shadowing the convoy deeper into the night, waiting for a chance. It came at dawn when the vehicle stopped at a compound hidden in the rocks. Guards dismounted, stretching, lighting cigarettes. The team moved, silent, surgical. She led the breach this time, her rifle steady, her breath controlled. Inside, chaos, shouts, gunfire, dust. But when the prisoner was pulled free, her eyes wide with terror, something inside the soldier steadied. Because for once she hadn't just stood, she had spoken. The extraction was bloody, but it was clean enough. By midday, they were back in the choppers, prisoner safe, convoy destroyed. Back at camp, the colonel was furious. You compromised the mission. You delayed the strike. You risked lives. She stood silent, eyes forward, his words crashing against her like waves against rock. But then the lieutenant stepped forward. She saved the prisoner, he said. His voice was even firm. She made the call no one else saw, and she was right. The colonel glared, the silence stretched. Then finally he barked, dismissed. She walked out into the blazing sun, heat pressing against her skin. For the first time she felt something shift, not in the camp, not in the colonel, but in herself. She wasn't just standing anymore. She was choosing where to stand. That night, as the horizon burned with another sunset, the lieutenant found her again. "You changed everything," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, just one thing. That's how it starts." His words lingered as the stars rose, sharp and clear. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself a thought she had buried deep, a fragile whisper she almost didn't recognize. Maybe I'm not just surviving, maybe I'm still alive. Why had she stopped breathing when the radio hissed alive? The sound was small, just static at first, but it rolled through the ruined hallway like a warning. Her finger froze on the trigger guard. Sweat traced down the side of her face, dust clinging to her cheek. She held her breath, listening. A voice broke through, male, cracked but steady. "Anyone alive? Repeat, anyone still holding the south block?" She didn't answer right away. Her throat tightened. The voice was one she hadn't heard in months, not since the outpost burned, not since that night she promised herself she'd never rely on anyone again. Captain Rains, her old commanding officer, the one who told her once quietly when no one else could hear, "You don't have to save them all. Just stand long enough for one more to live." Now his voice echoed, faint but real. Her finger trembled. "South block still holding," she whispered into the mic. Her voice cracked, betraying exhaustion. "One shooter still alive." Silence, then a pause that felt like recognition. "Imara." She shut her eyes. Hearing her name like that was a knife and a balm at the same time. "Still here," she said. And for the first time in days, she felt less alone. By nightfall she had pulled him in. Not physically, he was 3 blocks over, but through the radio, through fragments of breath and half-finished words. Their voices became lifelines. Every time she thought the silence would swallow her, he keyed the mic. Every time he stumbled, she steadied him with short, sharp sentences. "Don't move yet, wait for the wind. Count 3 and breathe before you fire. Keep your head low, keep it low." They weren't in the same room, not even in the same fight at times, but their rhythms began to align, 2 old scars meeting across shattered ground. She found herself asking questions she didn't mean to. "You still have that photo, the one from the desert?" A chuckle, broken and dry. "Sand in my teeth, sun in my eyes. Yeah, still have it." She smiled despite the ache in her chest. "Didn't think you'd keep anything. Didn't think I'd live long enough for it to matter." The line went quiet again, but not empty. Shared silence is different. It doesn't hollow you out, it holds you. Still, the city pressed in. The insurgents weren't retreating. They were waiting, testing. She felt it in the way the streets breathed, like predators circling. Her rifle's barrel caught the moonlight. She shifted positions 3 times, never sleeping more than 20 minutes at a stretch. Her body screamed for rest. Her hands shook when she reloaded. At one point she dropped a round, and the tiny metallic clink against concrete sent her heart racing like she'd given away her life. But then the radio cracked again. "You still with me, Mara?" She swallowed hard. "Yeah, still here." She didn't say it out loud, but the truth beat beneath her words. Because someone has to be. On the 3rd night, a boy appeared. She almost shot him. Small frame, dirt-smeared clothes, darting eyes. He'd crept too close to her hide without warning, clutching something metal. Her finger tightened, then she realized. Not a weapon, A canteen. He held it out with shaking hands. His lips trembled. He didn't say a word. Her breath caught. How long had he been watching her? Days, hours. She lowered her weapon slowly, painfully aware of how foreign she must look to him. Helmet shadowing her face, rifle longer than his arm, eyes hollow from nights without sleep. She whispered, "It's okay." The boy set the canteen down, then scurried back into the dark, barefoot against broken stone. She stared at the water, untouched, still sealed. Her throat burned with thirst, but her chest burned worse, with something she couldn't name. Someone had seen her. Someone had chosen to help, even in fear. She drank, and for the first time since the siege began, she felt the weight of what it meant to still be standing, not as a soldier but as a signal, a post in the storm. But mercy doesn't go unnoticed. By dawn, the enemy pressed harder. Gunfire rattled through alleys, sharper, closer. They spotted her patterns. They knew she wasn't just surviving, she was holding them back. "Mara," Rain said through the radio, his voice rough, urgent. "They're not probing anymore. They're preparing. They'll come all at once." She closed her eyes. She felt it too. The way the silence stretched longer between bursts. The way shadows moved in rhythm instead of chaos. This wasn't survival anymore. It was a countdown. "Then we break it before they do," she said. He didn't argue. That was something she loved about him. He trusted her more than she trusted herself. When the wave hit, it came like a storm breaking its banks. Dozens of boots, shouts in the guttural dark, shadows pouring like liquid through every crack in the street. Mara steadied her rifle, slow breath, sight aligned, squeeze. The first shot snapped skull from spine. The second scattered the lead runner's momentum into the wall. The third tore through the scream rising behind them. But they didn't stop. They kept coming. Her heart pounded. The air filled with gunpowder and grit. Each shot was a thread in a dam about to break, and she could feel the water rising. Over the radio, Rains was shouting, "They're splitting, half coming my way." "Hold," she whispered, though her own voice trembled. "Just hold." She reloaded blind, the motion so fast it cut her fingers. Blood smeared the magazine. Her shoulder ached from recoil. She tasted copper at the back of her throat. Still she didn't move, didn't falter. Because she remembered his words. Because she remembered the boy with the canteen. Because her duty wasn't about victory. It was about standing where no one else would stand. Hours later, silence fell. Her rifle clicked empty. Smoke drifted in the ruins. Bodies littered the street below. Her vision blurred from fatigue. "Mara," the radio whispered, so faint she almost thought she dreamed it. "Still with me." Her lips cracked into the ghost of a smile. "Still here," she whispered back. And as dawn bled over the horizon, painting the broken city in pale gold, she realized maybe that was enough. Why was the boy back? Mara's eyes snapped open, pulse hammering. She hadn't meant to sleep, not really, only to rest her cheek against the rifle stock for a moment. But the scrape of a pebble across the floor had dragged her into wakefulness, and there he was again. Barefoot, wide-eyed. And this time, he wasn't holding a canteen. He carried a folded scrap of paper, clutched tight as though it were a lifeline. He crouched in the ruined doorway, half hidden by shadow, staring at her as if afraid she might vanish if he blinked. Her throat tightened. She gestured with her hand, low, careful, gentle, "Come closer." The boy shuffled forward. His knees shook. When he finally placed the paper in her hand, she felt his fingers trembling, small bones beneath thin skin. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was rough, smudged with dirt, but the meaning was clear. "They are coming again. Tonight, many." Her chest hollowed out. The boy swallowed, pointing toward the east side of the block. He mimed guns. He mimed running. His lips moved without sound. His fear filled the silence. Mara wanted to tell him it would be okay. She wanted to say words she didn't believe herself. But the truth was heavy, and it pressed down on her like the ruined ceiling above. She crouched, lowering her eyes to his level. "Stay hidden," she whispered. "Don't come back." But the boy only looked at her, eyes too old for his years, carrying the kind of understanding children should never have. Then he slipped away again, leaving the warning behind. She radioed Rains. "East side tonight, heavy." A beat of silence, then his low exhale, "Confirmed from your end too." "Yes, civilians saw it." "Then we prepare." The way he said it chilled her. Not we survive, not we repel, just we prepare. She set her rifle across her knees and tried not to let the quiet crush her. As night fell, the city shifted. Wind curled through broken windows, carrying scents of oil and ash. The streets seemed to breathe differently and inhale before the strike. Somewhere far off, dogs barked, cut short by silence. Mara adjusted her scope, checked her rounds, rewrapped the bleeding cut on her hand. Each movement was ritual now, a dance with inevitability. She caught herself whispering into the dust, "Still here." The words steadied her. They came in silence at first. Shadows spilling low, disciplined, different than before. Not a wave this time, something colder, something patient. Through her scope she saw their faces, hard, determined professionals. Her gut clenched. These weren't the desperate fighters she'd been holding back. These were the ones sent to finish it. She breathed once, twice, then squeezed. The first man fell. The second dropped before he could drag the body aside. The third tried to vanish into rubble but left his foot exposed. But they didn't break. They didn't scatter. They pressed in, using cover, advancing like a tide that couldn't be stopped, only slowed. Her heart pounded. Sweat stung her eyes. Each shot mattered. Each second stolen meant another breath alive. But for how long? The radio crackled. "Mara." Rain's voice was steady, but beneath its strain. "They're moving on me too, heavies, coordinated." Her hands tightened around the rifle. "How many?" "Too many." The silence between them said everything. For the first time in days, fear threatened to unmake her. She wasn't afraid of dying, not exactly. She'd already made peace with that the night the outpost burned. What shook her was the thought of dying for nothing, of standing here until the last round clicked empty and then falling, leaving no difference at all. Her father's voice echoed in memory, soft and resigned. "Some fights aren't about winning. Some are about not letting go." She bit down hard, jaw aching. Not letting go, not yet. The assault broke into chaos when the boy appeared again. Mara's heart stopped as she caught him in her scope, darting across the alley with a satchel clutched to his chest. He shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have moved, but he was running straight into the path of the fighters. "No," Mara whispered, her voice cracked. "No." She fired, clipping the man closest to the child. Another dropped behind a wall. The boy stumbled, nearly fell, then disappeared into smoke. Her chest collapsed in on itself. For a moment she lost her rhythm. Her shots came too fast, too wide. Bullets screamed past her hide, shredding brick. She ducked, teeth grinding, lungs burning with helpless rage. What had the boy carried? What had driven him into that? The answer came seconds later. An explosion tore through the east corner, fire rolling up the wall, bodies scattering. The ground shook under her elbows. Through the haze, she saw the boy vanish into shadow again, alive. He'd bought them a gap, a pause. A child had done what trained soldiers could not. Her throat ached with grief and pride tangled together. The radio hissed alive again. "Mara," Rain said, coughing, words breaking on static. "They're breaking me. If I fall, you—" "Don't say it," she cut in. Her voice was sharper than she meant. "Don't you dare." "Mara," his tone softened. "You can't hold both sides. If I go down, pull back, live." Her eyes burned, live. The word felt like betrayal. She pressed her forehead against the rifle, whispering to herself, "Still here." Then louder into the radio, "You hold, I hold, that's the deal." His answer was only silence, but she felt him listening. The night stretched into hell. Smoke and muzzle flashes painted the world in strobing bursts of light and shadow. Her rifle grew hot, the barrel trembling with heat mirage. Her hands blistered. Her body screamed. She moved like a machine now, bone and will fused into rhythm. Sight, breath, squeeze. Sight, breath, squeeze. And every time doubt clawed at her, she whispered it again. Still here. By dawn, the streets were quiet. Too quiet. She shifted from her scope, blinking against exhaustion. Her head spun. The boy hadn't returned. Rains hadn't spoken in hours. The silence felt heavy, wrong. She keyed the radio, her voice raw. "Rains, do you copy?" Static. Rains, louder now, desperate. "Answer me." "Nothing." Her chest caved in. She felt the world tilt sideways. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she was still standing. She lowered the rifle. Her hands shook violently. Her vision blurred with tears she didn't have strength to wipe away. The silence pressed in like a tomb. And for the first time since the siege began, Mara felt truly alone. Why hadn't he answered? The radio sat in her palm like a dead weight. Static hummed faintly, as if mocking her. She pressed the button again, voice low, cracking with exhaustion. "Rains, come on, say something." Only silence. Her throat constricted. Her heartbeat filled her ears, louder than the city's emptiness. She forced herself to breathe, slow and deliberate. Panic wouldn't help, but beneath her discipline the truth gnawed. Something had happened. She shifted, crawling from her sniper's nest, knees grinding against broken glass. She scanned the horizon, the east block where he had been holding. Nothing moved. Smoke still rose faintly, but there were no muzzle flashes, no shouts, no signals of life. He was gone, or he wasn't answering, and she didn't know which was worse. The city had changed overnight. The boy hadn't come back. The fighters weren't probing. It was as if everything had paused, holding its breath, waiting for her to break. And maybe she already had. Her body was wrecked. Every joint screamed. Her lips were cracked from thirst, her ribs bruised from bracing against stone. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten more than a mouthful. But the real wound was deeper. Rains had been her anchor in the storm, even across the radio. His voice had reminded her that she wasn't the last one standing. Now that lifeline was gone. She stared at the mic, whispering, "Still here." But the words sounded hollow. By midday, she made the choice she had been avoiding. She couldn't sit in the nest forever. If Rains was alive, he needed her. If he was dead, she needed to know. The decision wasn't tactical. It wasn't rational. It was personal. She slung the rifle across her back, slipped through the crumbling stairwell, and stepped into the streets. The silence was crushing. Every corner looked like an ambush. Windows gaped like empty eyes. Dust swirled with each step she took, boots whispering over stone. She moved low, fast, her body remembering the drills even as her mind unraveled. Every sound, her breath, the faint creak of her pack, felt too loud. She passed the place where the boy had given her the warning. The dirt still bore faint footprints, small, bare. Her throat tightened. She whispered to no one, "I hope you're safe." And then she kept moving. The east block was a graveyard. Bodies lay in twisted heaps, weapons scattered. Walls were pockmarked with bullet holes, blackened with smoke. The smell of blood and charred stone coated the air, thick enough to choke. Mara stepped carefully, eyes scanning, rifle ready. "Rains," she whispered, her voice barely audible. No answer. She pushed deeper, past the shattered market stalls, past the collapsed roof that had buried two fighters still clutching their rifles, past the broken silence of men who had fought hard and died harder. And then she saw him. Collapsed against a wall, head bowed, rifle across his lap. Her chest seized. She dropped to her knees, shaking his shoulder. Rains, hey, come on. His head lolled. For one terrible heartbeat, she thought he was gone. But then, faintly, raggedly, he drew in a breath. Alive. Her relief almost broke her. He coughed, eyes fluttering open. His voice was weak, but his tone was the same one he'd used in every briefing, every order, every night when they were the last two left awake. Took you long enough. A laugh broke from her throat, harsh and wet. She pressed her forehead against his shoulder, biting back tears. Still here, she whispered. He tried to smile, but it twisted into pain. Barely. His side was soaked red. Bandages had been applied, sloppy, desperate. He'd been hit bad. She worked quickly, hands steady even as her heart raced. She rewrapped the wound, checked his pulse, rationed what little water she had. He watched her with tired eyes. You shouldn't have come, he murmured. She met his gaze, jaw tight. You think I'd let you die alone? For a moment neither spoke. The silence stretched, heavy with things unsaid. They stayed hidden in the ruins as the sun dipped again. He couldn't move far, not with the wound. She adjusted their position, pulled rubble to shield them, set her rifle in reach. She kept watch, eyes on the streets, ears straining for movement. But the quiet held. Rains dozed, waking only to murmur half-formed thoughts, sometimes names she didn't know, sometimes memories she couldn't share. Once, in the hollow of the night, he whispered, You always carried more than you had to. She looked at him, lips trembling. So did you. Toward dawn, he stirred again. His hand caught her wrist, grip weak but insistent. Mara, he said. Her name carried weight. When this ends, you walk away. She shook her head sharply. No. Yes, his eyes burned even through the pain. You've given enough, don't die in this place. She clenched her jaw, fighting the surge of grief and anger. My duty isn't about walking away. He coughed, the sound tearing through him, but his gaze didn't waver. It's about standing where no one else will. You've done that more than anyone. Don't let it consume you. His words sliced deep, because part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her wanted to leave this broken city behind, to live, to breathe without the weight of endless duty. But another part knew she couldn't. Not yet, not while others still breathed because she stood. Her silence was answer enough. The city stirred, footsteps in the distance, shadows regrouping. The fighters weren't finished. They'd be back, stronger, smarter. Mara loaded her rifle, movements sharp, precise. Her muscles screamed, but her resolve didn't waver. She glanced at Rains, his face pale, his breath shallow. She knew what was coming. She knew what she would choose. When the next dawn broke, she was on the rooftop again. Scope aligned, heart steady. The enemy was gathering in the streets below, voices rising, weapons ready. And Mara whispered the words she had carried through every night, every silence, every moment when standing felt impossible. Still here. The trigger broke. The war began again. Why was the sky so quiet? Mara lay prone on the rooftop, cheek pressed to the rifle stock, eyes locked through the scope. The fighters below moved like shadows, their boots crunching on broken stone, their voices low, measured. They weren't rushing this time. They weren't reckless. They knew she was still alive. Her finger rested on the trigger, steady despite the ache in her bones. Each breath tasted like dust and iron. Each second stretched thin, brittle. Beside her, Rains shifted against the wall where she had hidden him. His breathing was shallow, ragged, each exhale like glass dragging across stone. She hadn't asked how much longer he had. She didn't need to. Time was slipping away. Through the scope she caught a face. Young, barely older than the boy who had brought her water. A fighter with hands that trembled as he reloaded, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Her chest tightened. She could take the shot. She could end him before he even knew she'd seen him. But her finger hovered, frozen. What was she really doing here? holding ground no one else wanted, fighting ghosts of men who barely understood why they carried rifles. Her mind whispered back the truth she hated, because if she didn't, no one would. She exhaled and squeezed. The young man fell. Silence followed, heavy and endless. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat. Her soul felt heavier than the rifle in her hands. The assault came at dawn. Dozens of them, organized, relentless. Gunfire erupted, echoing between walls. Dust and smoke swallowed the streets. Mara's rifle cracked again and again, each shot buying seconds, each second bought with a piece of herself. Her muscles shook, her vision blurred. She forced herself into rhythm, sight, breath, squeeze, because rhythm was the only thing keeping her alive. But for every shadow that fell, two more rose. She heard Rain's cough, then choke. She didn't dare look back. She couldn't. If she saw him fatting, she would break. So she whispered instead, as if he could hear her through the roar, "Still here." The boy appeared in the chaos. Mara's heart lurched. He darted between alleys, dragging another child by the hand, a girl this time, smaller, eyes wide with terror. They were running toward her, toward the rooftop. "No," she hissed. She wanted to scream at them to turn back, to hide, to vanish, but their path was already set. Gunfire chased them, shadows closed in. Mara shifted, scope tracking, finger snapping the trigger. One fighter dropped. Another spun back in pain. She carved a path through the fire, cutting space for them to run. The boy stumbled but didn't stop. The girl clung to him, crying, her small frame a blur of fear. And then they reached the base of the building. Alive! Mara's chest cracked open with relief. Minutes later, the children crouched beside Rains in the corner, trembling. Mara reloaded with shaking hands, her body screaming. Rains caught her gaze, his lips pale, his voice barely a whisper. "They'll remember this. Not the fight, not the blood, just you." She shook her head. "It's not about me." He coughed, grimaced. "It always was." His hand slipped from the rifle on his lap. Mara swallowed hard, turned back to her scope. She couldn't let herself feel. Not now, not yet. The fighters pressed harder, closer. Her position wouldn't hold. Not with so many. Not with her body failing, her ammunition running dry. For the first time, she let herself think it. This might be the end. But then she glanced back, the boy's eyes wide but unbroken. The girl clinging to his arm. Rains fatting but still trying to sit upright, still trying to be a soldier even in his last breaths. And something inside her steadied. Her father's words returned, clearer than ever. Some fights aren't about winning. Some are about not letting go. Mara whispered to herself, voice raw, "Then I don't let go." The last magazine slid into place. She pressed her cheek to the stock, sight aligned, heart steady. The world narrowed to crosshairs and breath. She fought like a wall of stone, unmoving, unyielding. Every shot cracked against the tide, every second stolen a victory. Bullets tore through her cover, fragments of bricks slicing her arms. One round grazed her shoulder, burning hot. Another clipped her helmet, ringing her skull. But she didn't fall. Because falling meant they would reach the children. Because falling meant everything she had endured was for nothing. At some point, she stopped counting rounds. Stopped noticing the recoil. Stopped feeling the ache in her muscles. She became silence and steel. A shadow anchored to the rooftop, refusing to break, refusing to vanish. And still, against everything, the tide slowed. The fighters hesitated. Their voices wavered. Their courage cracked. Because sometimes, one person standing is heavier than an army advancing. The final shot rang out. Her rifle clicked empty. Mara's hands trembled on the stock, her chest heaving. The street below was littered with bodies, smoke curling upward, silence settling like ash. She lowered the weapon slowly. For the first time, her arms felt impossibly heavy. Behind her, the boy whispered something to the girl. She couldn't hear the words, but she heard the tone. Awe, gratitude, the sound of someone who would carry this memory forever. Her eyes closed, her lips parted. "Still here," she whispered one last time. The sun rose over the broken city, painting the ruins gold. Mara sat slumped against the wall, her rifle across her lap, eyes half closed but unyielding. The children huddled close. Rains no longer breathed, but his head rested as if in peace. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of sacrifice, of memory, of dignity that didn't need words. Because her duty had never been about victory. It had never been about killing more, or surviving longer, or holding ground forever. It had been about standing where no one else would stand. And in that silence, the truth lingered like smoke in the light. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.